Hey everyone, Dr. Frunke here with a review and a final diagnosis on the Spyderco Shaman. This is a very anticipated knife that came out of Golden, Colorado this year that was designed by Sal Glesser. Really excited to get this one in hand. Go ahead and check out my unboxing for my initial impressions on this knife. I've had it and carried it and used it now for a couple of months, and I feel like I can formulate a final diagnosis on this. And I've been really happy. I will say this knife has not disappointed me even once. I really wasn't thinking that this was going to be an awesome knife. When I first saw the pictures, I was like, meh, who really cares? It's sort of just another knife in the medium-large category. But it has really blown me away, and that will be reflected in my final diagnosis. So before we go too much farther, let's go ahead and break this knife down anatomically so we know what we're working with. Up front is a blade that's about 3.25 inches in the overall cutting length. Back to the handle, you're getting about 3.6 inches. Back to the pivot is a hair over 4 inches. The grip area is actually 5 inches, while the actual handle is only about 4.5. That forward finger choil provides you some extra grip spots up front. The overall width is coming in right at about 0.534 inches, and the blade stock is at 0.145 inches. So a nice robust blade stock. That's actually exactly the same blade stock as the Paramilitary 2. The overall weight is going to come in a little bit on the heavy side. We talked about this in the unboxing video, 5.22 ounces. So that is a bit of a heavy knife right there. Let's go ahead and bring out the only two knives that are really relevant for a size comparison, and that is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 and the Spyderco Manix 2. I mentioned in my own unboxing video I wanted to do a three-way comparison video, but I think that video is really just going to be this final diagnosis here, because this is the important thing to understand, is to be able to differentiate this knife amongst this lineup of Spyderco knives. Spyderco offers a very wide range of blades from small to very big and incrementally changing sizes and shapes, and so it's important to kind of understand the differences and why you might choose this knife over either of these other two knives. So the go-to knife for Spyderco is definitely the Paramilitary 2. I recommend this knife to everyone who wants a Spyderco. At least I used to, and we're going to figure out why in a few minutes. The knife was designed by Eric and Sal and has a very nice ergonomic grip. It has a beautiful slicing blade, and it comes in a lot of exotic metals like this M4 with a carbon fiber handle. All of the models have this sort of textured G10 or carbon fiber on the front. I've added a deep carry clip on this one myself. This is really the go-to knife. It's incredibly smooth, it runs on washers, and it's a super nice knife. I gotta take a sip of water there. Next is the Spyderco Manix 2. This one was designed by Eric, and so it's interesting that we have a knife from Sal, a knife from Eric, and a knife from Sal and Eric. You can kind of see where their influences come into these knives. This knife is similar to the PM2 nested steel liners, G10 scales that are textured with this very rough G10 texturing, and the ergonomics are spot on. The blade is a little bit smaller, and the blade stock comes in at 0.125 rather than 145. So both of these knives are going to be a little bit more robust than this knife. This one in particular. I think it's important to also understand the thickness at the tip of each one of these knives. If you look, the blade stock on the Manix is going to be the absolute thinnest at the tip. Next will be the Para 2, and then the last will be the Shaman. You can see how much thicker the blade stock remains on the Shaman all the way out here on the left side, all the way out to the tip. So that's a pretty neat thing right there. So very robust and strong knife here. Notice also an important thing ergonomically, and something that I notice when I'm holding it, is the size of this forward finger choil. It's smaller on the Manix and the PM2 than it is on the Shaman. And that actually is more comfortable on the Shaman, but leads to its biggest flaw, and we'll get into that. So understand what's going on there. Next, the handles. I talked about how the texturing on these is a little bit rough. The smooth texturing on this G10 allows this knife to slide in and out of the pocket beautifully. I tend to carry Spydercos with more of my athletic gear because they're lighter knives, but this texturing makes it hard to get it in and out of the pocket, and it tends to shred the inside of the pocket quickly. This is very smooth, and I never ran into any problems over the course of carrying it. I do wish that they had put the traditional clip on this knife. and maybe move that lanyard hole somewhere. Spyderco really struggles with its lanyard holes. I just sometimes wish they would get rid of them because 90% of us aren't using them, so it's all good. In any case, that's my knife comparison of these three. So it's maybe you have a better understanding maybe of where this knife slots. So let's look at this knife piece by piece, and anatomically we can figure out what the diagnosis is going to be here. Let's look at that blade done in S30V, nice high flat grind. Some might call it a saber grind because it's got this flat area right here. Classic leaf-shaped blade, nice large finger hole for deployment, easy to deploy. The detent on this knife is rather strong. I wish that they would put this detent on the Spyderco sliver axe because it's very, very strong. Easily the strongest detent of any of those three knives, but it sort of adds to that muscularity that this knife has, that you've got to be a little bit more aggressive with it to make it do what you want. But it is very smooth. You can see that it just flies back into the handle, and it's very, very, very easy. The fatal flaw of this knife is this little bit right here, and you can see that that forward finger choil protrudes into the lock area, so that when you're closing the knife, that will actually come up in there and push your finger out of there. And actually, if you do it fast enough, your finger might actually get pinched a little bit between the lock and that tab right there. And as we've seen on these other two knives, they certainly know how to shave that down and make it a little bit smaller of a nub right there. So I think that in the Shaman 2, we need to see that revision. I might like to see this push back a couple of degrees, a couple of millimeters, so that that is gone. Maybe you'd get a slightly longer edge too. Make it look something like the Paramilitary 2 maybe. That could work just fine. Or this Mannix. You know, either way, I think it would work. But that is the one drawback, and I think everyone who's reviewed this knife has talked about that. Now, I know Sal spent a very long time. He said he spent 4 or 5 years developing this knife to get it just right. But I'll say that's the only thing about this knife that I have to complain about. The only thing. Everything else is great. Moving back, it runs on phosphor bronze washers and is unbelievably smooth, which you can see. Very easy deployment. Very easy to disengage that lock. There's no lock stick, and I have not seen lock stick on a couple of versions of this that I've seen, which is different from the PM2. Sometimes those have a little bit of lock stick. This one does not. Super nice construction. You can see my takedown video. I did a surgery video on this. Relatively easy to disassemble and put back together. Very much unlike the Mannix, which is a real pain in the butt to take apart and put back together because of that ball bearing lock. So I definitely appreciate that. And then the handles. These contoured pieces of G10 are absolutely wonderful. I talked about how it's better to go in and out of the pocket, and it's certainly more comfortable in the hand. Once you get this contoured G10 in hand, these squared off edges on the Paramilitary 2 and the Mannix just won't do anymore. They're just not quite as comfortable. Now, those aren't uncomfortable by any means, but this is just luxury like you haven't seen. It's like a Toyota versus a Lexus. The ride on this is just so much smoother. And that begs to have some really nice materials used. I would absolutely go head over heels for a full carbon fiber version. Now, I know that's in the work. Sal has actually mentioned in the forums that he had every intention of releasing this knife with a carbon fiber and S90V version. It came out like this first. He also said that this deserves to be a test bed for different steels and different handle materials. So you know you're going to see sprint runs in this of some awesome stuff. I personally think that micarta would also be epic on this handle. The shape and everything means that it will be nice and warm and rich. I would love to see micarta, but I would also adore carbon fiber. See this in M4, S110V, Maximet, all of those awesome steels that they've got right now. Choose one, Sal, and make it. It will sell by the thousands. You're going to do really well with that. So what is my final diagnosis on this knife? This is a Paramilitary 2 killer. Honestly, this knife is more comfortable in the hand, it's easier to get in and out of the pocket, and the potential for the sprint runs is also very high, just like on the Paramilitary 2. Now, I would think on the Shaman 2, they're going to fix this problem, and then it will really be the perfect knife. But I really do think that this knife deserves to be as popular as the Paramilitary 2. It's just as good and probably a little bit stronger. It's a little bit easier for me to carry because of the reasons that I mentioned in this video, and I absolutely love it. They have done a beautiful job. Thank you so much, Sal, for making this knife, and I look forward to the sprint runs that you're going to do. What do you guys think of this knife? Leave your comments down below. Click like and subscribe to my channel here. Check me out on Instagram at Dr. Frunky. And as always, guys, this is Dr. Frunky saying take care.